Okay, so now we have done the dewaxing process and we have let the flasks to cool down. Before we start the application of cold mold seal on these flasks, we must make sure that the plaster which was packed during the packing process, flasking process, we must make sure that there isn't any unsupported plaster like you can see over here. This is slightly unsupported. Now this might break. This plaster might break while packing of acrylic. Similarly, you can see over here also, this is an unsupported plaster. So we need to carve this out slightly and bring the plaster surface on a solid bag. So what we need to do is take a wax knife and just carve out this area. But you make sure that you're not scratching the cast also by doing this. So by scratching out or carving out this excess plaster, which is unsupported, now we have adequate area on which the acrylic can be packed. Now please make sure that whenever you're doing a step like this, there's going to be plaster falling in the vestibule over here. So you need to clear that out by high pressure air or just by blowing inside. Or you can use this clean brush to clean this area. Make sure you don't scratch off the cast, I repeat again, so that in this way, if you do it this way, the cast won't be quite safe from any kind of scratches on the surface. Now we come to the mandible. Look at the mandible also. This is the area which is slightly over unsupported. So what you need to do is again carve this area out. Make sure that there is no unsupported plaster and you don't scratch the cast. Okay, so once we've finalized that this is all clear, similarly plaster here. So we need to also see that is there plaster excess here. So there was some excess plaster, I cleared it from here also. And since after this that we are sure that there is no excess plaster, we'll now start with the application of cold mold seal. Okay, now that we are going to start the packing of application of cold mold seal and then subsequent packing of acrylic, I just wanted to mention that the plaster on the mandibular cast has broken off. But this plaster is now present in this cast, in the upper middle chamber over here. So before packing of acrylic, you must always make sure, in a scenario like this, please make sure that you know how to close the flask and what is going to be the path of insertion and closure. Because if you're unaware of this, you must make sure that the flask closes properly and this plaster which has broken off is not interfering with the closure. And if it's interfering, then what you need to do is you need to remove this portion out so that there is no more interference. This step involves application of cold mold seal. Now cold mold seal is applied when you're going to pack acrylic. You can't pack acrylic by application of Vaseline or petroleum jelly, as petroleum jelly or Vaseline is going to interfere or hinder the polymerization process of acrylic. So we need to have a separating medium which does not affect the polymerization process. So for this, cold mold seal is quite appropriate. So this is cold mold seal. You need to have an application brush. Any camel hair brush is adequate for this. What you need to do is that you need to apply cold mold seal in one direction, unidirectional. The reason for this is that if you apply in one direction, there won't be any rough surfaces appearing on the cast, and also there won't be any clumps on the surface. Make sure that you have adequate cold mold seal applied in the deepest portions of these vestibules. Now we'll let this cast to dry. Similarly, we'll apply cold mold seal on the middle part of the cast, which is the cope. Apply this cold mold seal adequately and appropriately to all the surfaces. Now the application of cold mold seal is completed. We'll wait for a while till this application of cold mold seal layer dries up. And the only indication that it has dried up is that when you touch the surface, it shouldn't feel tacky. It shouldn't feel sticky also. Since there's adequate cold mold seal applied, we might just go for one application, but this depends. Please make sure that the crest of the cast over here, cold mold seal becomes relatively thin, and these are the areas where acrylic tends to bind. So we apply another thin layer of cold mold seal on these top surfaces, on the crests of all the cast surface. Make sure that during the application of cold mold seal, there are no clumps forming on the surface, as these clumps will then hinder this thickness of the acrylic, and will also change the thickness of acrylic, because this is going to change the surface of the cast. Make sure that the cold mold seal applied is as thin as possible.